All right, so let's tie this thing all the way back to the Alabama Auburn game. Now, no, I'm not going to recap it, but essentially, Auburn had a chance to go down the field towards the end of the game and tie it up, make some very interesting things in the SEC picture go down. Because at that point, if Alabama were to somehow lose, well, let's say they wouldn't be the team facing off against Georgia in the SEC championship game. And with a rivalry as influential and filled with all kinds of hatred, like the Iron Bowl, Auburn definitely wanted to seize that moment and have a chance to take them down. And at least briefly get a good hit on them. Alabama probably still would have made the CFP. It's Alabama. Nonetheless, they're driving, they get into their territory. And they actually throw Cam Coleman the football. That's been the MO all season long, and they haven't consistently done that. But when they have, good things usually happen. Not in this game. I didn't even know that he was a true freshman before the game. But this was a very unfortunate time for a rookie mistake, so to speak, because he would fumble the football on what probably should have been a routine play. Alabama got it back, and for a second, it looked as though that was going to be the game. And you could see it in his reaction. He might have gotten a little bit banged up because he was moving a little bit awkwardly off the football field, but still, the emotion that comes with that. You could very much see it in how he was acting around his other teammates as they were trying to help him out. He could not believe that just happened. Now, fortunately for them, they did still have a few timeouts left, but ultimately that wouldn't really do much of anything. They stunned absolutely nobody with their terrible clock management on what would be their final drive. And Auburn would lose that game, giving Alabama the matchup against Georgia in the conference title game for the SEC. Now, why do I mention that game specifically? In what might seem to be irrelevant when looking at the title of this particular video. Well, in the event that Alabama lost this game, Ole Miss would have been the team to be facing off against Georgia in the SEC title game. That Ole Miss team. And what would happen? Just a mere, can't say few hours, especially when you look at this from Marty Smith's perspective from ESPN. Update after update coming in, virtually just telling us the same thing. And he had to stake out the entire thing. Everybody was wondering whether or not he was getting his rest in. It dragged on for that much time. But all of that angst, all of the blood boiling on rivalry week between some of the heated ones, would reach even greater heights with something that was becoming more and more expected as the day drew closer. And finally, on that given day, Sunday, it would be detailed by Pete Thamel, by ESPN, by multiple publications, that Lane Damn Kiffin would move from Ole Miss to become the new head coach at LSU. One of the most desirable jobs in the cycle at the time. left on the board, untouched by anybody, really. And the details on that, per that report from Pete Thamel, had him for a 7-year, $100 million contract with incentives or bonuses. Because as this Bleacher Report article states, Kiffin will earn $13 million per year, making him one of the highest paid coaches in college football. And if Kiffin wins a national title, his annual compensation would automatically increase to make him the highest paid coach in the country. End quote. So that makes sense, right? That makes tremendous sense. LSU is that kind of squad where it's like we know how much they have won consistently in just the last 25 years alone. They demand excellence. So that's going to light just a little fire additionally in Kiffin at this point. I couldn't not expect that to be the case. And like I mentioned, as it was being talked about in the days leading up to the actual decision, just crazy how all that is going down. For a coach, you usually see that from the player's perspective. Lane Kiffin was literally triggering such a tremendous reaction to it almost everywhere. Wild to think about that from that standpoint. But it's damn. All the focus on Lane Kiffin in this situation. And it just, by doing that, you fail to account for a ton of different things here. Because the entire background gets very ugly the further you dig deeper into it. And with some of the stuff that I was probably going to talk about here, it probably will have yet another layer to it. As I saw something else from, different things through my feed mentioning that there were leaked text messages about the entire thing between Lane Kiffin and somebody else. That's a different story for a different day. That isn't necessarily something I had on the docket here. But the main question is, how did we even get to this point? Yes, by the time we neared closer to it, some people, insiders per se, might have felt it was a foregone conclusion that would happen. Pundits might have felt that it was a foregone conclusion, given how much appeal the LSU job had once Brian Kelly was gone. And once they got other leadership in there, by, again, ousting Scott Woodward. It was desirable. So from that standpoint, it's fair. But legitimately, how did we get to this point? Well, we got to take it even further back. And there's definitely going to be a bit of a road trip here. But the main context would start a few weeks ago when it was mentioned that both LSU and Florida were in the running for acquiring Lane Kiffin's services. Both of them, per multiple reports from Thamel at the time and other individuals who were closer to the situation. Way closer than most individuals. When you think about it, it's crazy. Because at that point, Florida was actually in the midst of, or on the verge of, playing Ole Miss at the time. And you're coming out and you're stating that this is the man you want to lead your team into the future. And it's like, geez, like it's a direct competition. And I mean, there was a little bit of a buzz around it at that time. But if you look back at the game itself, that game actually got close, and Florida almost won it. They almost did. Yet, with Ole Miss still getting that win, and with a lot of the other stuff surrounding it, you could say that it was a bit of an audition, a scouting report, to get a read on what exactly Kiffin does well and how he could operate with the football team. Wicked levels of damn near tampering, if I do say so myself. Like, there's just so much conflicting interest in that. But 'tis how it goes. And that is the case because of another element of this that I'll get into later. It's incredibly significant. Same with LSU. They were responsible, Ole Miss, for one of the LSU losses earlier in the season when Brian Kelly was still there. And that game was firmly in the control of the Rebels for most of the way through. LSU still had a decent fight in that one. Like, when you look at how both of these schools were gunning for him, it makes sense. It just makes sense. As multiple articles look into, the record speaks for itself. A 55-19 record in 6 years for a program who was still searching for their first national championship since 1963, Ole Miss is. And you are now in a situation where you are giving them one of the best seasons, if not the best run they've ever had in a single season as a program. And with both of these teams looking specifically for a coach who they think can go there and make them great enough to win championships, Lane Kiffin shows a lot of potential. Yes, that is crazy to say, even though he's been around for quite some time. Quite some time. He's been in a load of places, and we'll get to that. But after all of that, like, he's now back in the conversation, back in the national mix. And it just feels kind of like the perfect storm almost to go on and get your hands on such a prized asset as a head coach. But that's just how the chips fell leading up to this point. You can't blame an LSU or a Florida for going out there and trying to take their shots. You can't. They are actively pursuing head coaches, and they are actively trying to hit key milestones in this offseason. They have to do what they have to do. Fair enough. But from Ole Miss's perspective, from Kiffin's leadership there, you are actively going through this right now. You are in the midst of us making a potential playoff run. Why do you want to leave now? Right now? Like, I don't know. He just has developed a tendency over the years in all his stops, and again, we can dive deeper into that. But essentially, just when you think things are going good, everything's fine, he's going to leave. He's going to leave. As much as I've talked about Bobby Petrino and his cowardly ass, you could argue that maybe not coward per se, that could be a little strong, but in terms of just upping and leaving on teams, Lane Kiffin is the same beast in that regard. The same beast. from an outsider's perspective looking in, and with the pattern that he's had over the years. It's wild. And it's bold, because through all of this, as a head coach specifically, he does not have a postseason appearance to his name. You'd think now would be the perfect time to capitalize on that. And go out there and potentially win a championship with the guys. And what about the players? Now you're telling me they have to go out there without a person who literally recruited them there. And as has been the case for years, and even with what Cam Newton said on First Take about it, in the world of college football, coaches are going to attract players. That's how it is. Now, again, let's just think about Nick Saban, because their connection is obviously a core component of this. Dating back to his time in Alabama as a coordinator. When you think of Saban, was he a player's coach? No. But his resume spoke for itself. And you can go through a full Dropbox of players that committed to that man single-handedly just because they knew they had as great of a chance as anybody else in the nation to win championships with that school. And even if Lane Kiffin hadn't reached that kind of territory yet as a head coach, he instilled hope in these players. He got them hyped up to go out and compete. He got them in these different position battles, while bringing in a few other guys like Trinidad Chambliss, for example, coming all the way from Ferris State D2 school as a transfer and doing what he's been doing this season. Making personal connections in cases with pretty much every single person in that locker room. They're spending countless hours of the day, pretty much every single day, in that space, around them, in whatever capacity. And now all that time, all that energy spent working towards what was originally believed to be a common goal, now just makes these players think that they were just pawns. They still have to go out there and do this, of course. It's all about the execution at the end of the day. And who's to say, as of the recording of this video, conference championships playoffs haven't even started yet. So who knows? They can go on a miraculous run still. But you've got to think that the morale in there is certainly it's taking a decent hit right now for pretty much every person in that locker room. That is still there, at least, or still has a desire to be there. Very quickly, though, we would get a statement from him that would be a little interesting. And the main component of that is something that I would just say to think about for a little bit. Because I'm not going to get into it yet. But just hear this out for a second. Okay, so the statement is pretty much on most of these articles, but let me get one up with the full. Yep, okay, here we go. So this is from Lane Kiffin's Twitter, I guess. This is a tweet that he put out shortly after the news broke. Quote, "After a lot of prayer and time spent with family, I made the difficult decision to accept the head coaching position at LSU. Was hoping to complete a historic 6-season run with this year's team by leading Ole Miss through the playoffs, capitalizing on the team's incredible success and their commitment to finish strong, and investing everything into a playoff run with guardrails in place to protect the program in any areas of concern. My request to do so was denied by Keith Carter, despite the team also asking him to allow me to keep coaching them so they could better maintain their high level of performance. Unfortunately, that means Friday's Egg Bowl was my last game coaching the Rebels. While I'm looking forward to a new start with a unique opportunity at LSU, I'll forever cherish the incredible 6 years I spent at Ole Miss and will be rooting hard for the team to complete their mission and bring a championship to Oxford. Lane Kiffin." This is not the part that I was trying to cover right now, but I will note that, yes, technically, there were multiple reports for weeks down the line after said Florida Ole Miss game, stating that there was reportedly from Thamel an ultimatum proposed from the AD Keith Carter at Ole Miss to Lane Kiffin, essentially telling him, pushing him to make a decision soon, very soon. And originally, I think it was set for the 21st. Then something had to have changed, and they decided that, hey, okay, after the game against Mississippi State, the Egg Bowl rivalry, then you need to make a decision right then and right there. And again, tying back into a core component in this, from that standpoint, you can't control that. From another standpoint, it's like, yeah, that's fair enough. Given the little bit of cushion that you do have. Because that could change countless things. And I mean, hell, like, even great points have been brought up about this. Florida State went through the same thing when Jordan Travis went down. Is there anything really stopping the committee, as all over the places they can be, from factoring in the loss of Lane Kiffin and somehow holding that against the players? They should still make the CFP. But it wouldn't be surprising if you see them slide down a little bit. CFP rankings haven't happened yet as of the recording of this video either. But that's a very real possibility that, again, they didn't ask for. It's just a lot of yeah, this is a really good time to say it too. Like, who really won this? Who really wins this? You have a clear loser on your hands, no matter where you look. And that strongly includes the players who, again, by no means wish this upon themselves. They're just trying to go out there, do what they gotta do, work as hard as they can to go and make a run for a championship. And again, yes, it's a different era of college football. But still, that connection, or what they thought they had with Lane Kiffin, is gone like that. And I think one of the players, through another video that came on my feed, like, they flat out called him a traitor. Like, literally, to end off rivalry week. From their perspective, you, and Keith Carter's perspective, mind you, which will be important later on, you actively made a decision to leave this team and bail for a sworn rival in Louisiana State University. Why would anyone want to be around that and have that kind of awkward feeling when they're in a room with you. It was not going to be pretty in any way, shape, or form. But to have to let that just linger in your mind while seeing the person on a daily basis after this happened just a few days or so ago, like, no, that would not fly. That wouldn't. It just wouldn't. Like, ay. But yeah. So, at this point, you gotta kind of get some insight, now at least, into the true motive. Do we really know? Well, before this even happened, you actually had Nick Saban throw out an idea that makes tremendous sense. As this USA Today article states, via a quote that Saban had on the College Game Day show just a day before this happened. Quote, I think Lane's decision is going to come down to one thing, Saban said. Where is the place that I can recruit the best players? I think one of Lane's apprehensions is that he's had to use the portal to build his team at Ole Miss each year, and at LSU, he could probably recruit better talent and then just supplement his team by need with the portal. And I think that's probably the dilemma that he has, as well as his loyalty to his team that he's coaching now, that he wants to be able to continue to coach. End quote. Fair enough. In this comment, because the transfer portal, boy, like, yes, you can have those teams who get massive hits from the transfer portal, but with the amount of players that are allowed to go in there on an annual basis, and maybe not even for some of the most compelling reasons, it can become oversaturated. Like, you still have to be able to have a good amount of balance in getting very solid, true recruits. And then trying to figure out, okay, maybe we're a little bit weaker in one position. Let's go see about specific transfer guys who might fill this void. And approach it that way. That's reasonable. Like, he has very much done that. It wasn't just Chambliss. You have a number of other players, including Kawan Lacey, who is also a transfer from a different program. And while those guys are going to be there for you right now, you still have to give room for a true future of homegrown talent, somewhat, to overtake the team and become staples of it. LSU could very much make that happen. And LSU has consistently made that happen. Especially with them being in search of one specific recruit. And I think he actually had commentary on the matter as well once Lane Kiffin was hired. So, I mean, that helps. But yeah, no, that's a pretty obvious perspective. And it's wild. Because again, Saban, the thing with him was that, hey, in this time, he essentially said, by the time he decided to give up coaching, that all of this was becoming too much for him to handle. And this is Nick Saban saying this. Maybe it's something that he would never want to come back to, but it is an interesting thing to see that as an analyst, he's starting to get a little more of an understanding, slowly but surely, about the nuances that may go into this thing or may not factor into this thing for some of the other programs in the country. And that could be a risk as well. Because, as one of the other Bleacher Report articles stated, Kiffin also took the offensive coordinator. He also took the offensive coordinator to LSU with him. So, maybe there's a good chance that, okay, he sticks around. Is there anything really stopping him from picking up other core players of that team and taking them all over to Baton Rouge? In the same way that Deion Sanders had that debut, getting all those guys out of the transfer portal, a lot from Jackson State, when he became Colorado's head coach in 2023. And even then, like it could have been right now, you just have to understand this. The players who were just cut off from that team completely. You heard a number of them come out and voice their sentiments and frustrations on that. It would have been the same way if Kiffin had remained there and done this. Like, there's just, you can't really get around that. Even if that might not have been an intent of his, it could probably go down. Truly. Now, Alright, well, before moving into that component, we gotta get even deeper into it for Lane Kiffin on a somewhat personal level. And again, even in saying this right now, granted, I have not seen whatever these leaks are looking like, so that can completely discredit everything that I'm going to say. But I'm just going to come out and I'm going to say it anyways. I was watching video from a different YouTuber who actually covered Lane Kiffin's career 6 months ago. I was getting that recommended to me at the time that this man recently got hired at LSU. And that just adds yet another segment to that video. Crazy. But it mentioned some really deep points, especially when you look at the connection with Monty Kiffin, his father. Like, at every single one of the destinations that Lane Kiffin has been in. And again, like I said, he's gotten around. But Monty Kiffin, in some way, shape, or form, was there with him physically or had an influence on him being at a respective destination at a given time. Every single place. And it all started back at USC. And, yep, ton of just, man, like, bad memories for a few Trojan fans out there just sparked right back up. Yes, he was there under Pete Carroll for a number of years and would then expand to other places all around the college football landscape. He got a stint at Alabama. He got a stint at Tennessee. Got a stint at Florida Atlantic. And also Ole Miss. And even when I plug this in, because there's definitely a great chance that I'm overlooking specific destinations as well. But he has an extensive amount of overall experience in the landscape as a coordinator before becoming a head coach in different spots. And that is how things go sometimes. But literally, you cannot talk about him, or at least that was the case for some years. You can't talk about him without mentioning the fact that he is Monty Kiffin's son, a coach coordinator who is highly regarded and highly respected by most everyone he worked with, at least with how things were displayed about him. Responsible for the way, as Pete Carroll said it, that he called defense. And what the hell did that lead to? Truly, somebody who might be considered a revolutionary in that space. And while I feel like I saw the initial report, it must have completely escaped my mind somehow. In any case, that video would detail how Monty Kiffin, a person who had been with him pretty much everywhere for the entirety of his career as a coordinator and coach, died in 2024, last year. I think over the summer. And naturally, that's going to hit hard. Naturally. Not even just on a perspective of a football connection. That is his father. Literally. Following in his every footsteps. In having such an unbreakable bond to where you, no matter what the hell Lane Kiffin was doing or not doing, he was there. And just like that, no more, unfortunately. Meaning that for the first time this season, to add even more sentimentality to it, not only are you on pace to do this, but you are now doing this. Well, technically for the second year, right? But all without your father there, by your side or supporting you from afar in whatever fashion. And even though on the surface he's going to be pulling off some of his tendencies, that is just what it is, right? But far beneath it, that's something he's got to live with on a daily basis. And yes, there are a number of other things. Believe me, there are a number of other things that could have factored into his decision. But you can't discount that with having his father's loss in mind, it may have made for one of the most difficult decisions he's ever had to make in his life. Not just from a football perspective. Overall. Like, he had a conversation, I think. They referenced he had multiple conversations with different coaches, like Pete Carroll. I think Pete Carroll said something to him like, hey, Monty would want you to take the job. And he was like, okay, that kind of influenced him in a way to make the move. Still, assuming this job is LSU means that this will be, for pretty much the first time in his life, his first destination where, he is just not going to be able to lean on Monty Kiffin in the affectionate way that he typically would if he were still with us. That can carry a lot of weight. And I have no doubt that in some way, having that go down, even with things going good, at least forced him to play around with the idea of potentially moving on to something different. Because that kind of put things into perspective a little bit. And granted, if that single-handedly, if that alone was the reasoning through and through for him going, I don't think anybody would have an issue with what has been going down. I don't think anybody would. They could not blame him in that situation. But again, this is the same guy. Even with me saying all of that, his son is currently a commit. And he, even while trying to distance himself, named LSU as a top 3 destination in his class of 2028 for him. He did that. Lane Kiffin had his family come with him to these games in Gainesville and Baton Rouge. No problem there. But throughout that entire time, they were literally scouting the premises and looking a little deeper into things. Potentially to leverage some kind of a choice between the two. This was actively happening. So when considering that, and then also understanding, because as I saw through multiple videos as well, and this one is incredibly obvious. Him trying hard to get the Auburn job in 2022, I believe. Well, 2023. I didn't know about that. I will admit. And he also tried, even in the same spot, even with the way last year went, he was actively trying to get the Alabama job. Once Nick Saban called it a career. Actively. Again, former coordinator there. Hey, I'll go back. I'll return to you guys, right? You want me, right? No, they didn't. There's a reason for that. There's a tremendous reason for that. He, again, brings a consistent amount of deceit, in a way, and baggage with him at every single one of these stops. Tennessee was a 1-year deal, not so hot. USC got incredibly toxic, and he was out of there. Alabama, the story keeps going around. He was literally late for a practice leading up to a pivotal game in Alabama season in the postseason. And he was fired before national championship game for them. Incredibly toxic. In Florida Atlantic, this is tough for them. At this point, they were in the Conference USA. You come off of a season like that, and you win the Boca Raton Bowl again. What would have been the problem with staying there for at least a little more time? But no, as soon as something desirable opened up, he jumped ship. And it makes it to where, even if it is not always his intent in some way, shape, or form, like, bruh, you talk about literally leaving a trail of blood no matter where you turn. This is exactly what that looks like. In this Ole Miss situation was ugly, factoring all of that in. How can you truly sit there and take the man seriously as all of this is going on around you? It's like a circus. Somebody compared it to a reality show. How can you take that seriously when even with what he tells you right to your face at times, it could end up being something completely different within a matter of minutes? It is it's incredibly frustrating, especially if you are an authority that has to deal with it. I mean, dude, like, LSU themselves is going to have to deal with the same thing. And I think that video, even with this not happening, like, this was 6 months ago. This wasn't even bound to happen at the time. But that video that I mentioned, be sure to put that in like an index card, wherever the timestamp for it is. But like, as this article puts it here, there's a long-standing quote, but it makes perfect sense here. It makes perfect sense. Okay? All right. In response to the statement, this quote says, well, if he hoped enough, Kiffin could have just stayed and done it. He didn't. Trying to paint this as an Ole Miss decision, not a Lane Kiffin decision, is absurd. You are either in or you are out. End quote. There are even people who are siding with him in terms of taking the money. But understand that, all of the aftermath of this shit, how many people you are affecting by doing it in this way, it is just such a bad look. But he is responsible for it. And you have to hold him accountable for that. Even with me bringing up that segment, which does make sense, about the loss of his father potentially factoring into this. That is still something that he is being influenced by, and not anybody else per se. You made the choice to go out there and listen into these. And as I was alluding to earlier, you can't blame LSU and Florida for taking their shots, with Florida eventually bowing out and again hiring John Summerall, as I mentioned in the recap. You can't blame them for calling their shots, but you answered the call. You made a choice to punt on the guys in the Ole Miss locker room that you were building something with right now for future prospects at LSU per se. You were building towards and being attracted towards the potential that they offer as a program. And even this article right here, this is more of an opinion piece from ESPN. But at that point, like, people would still, there would probably be a little bit of a negative reaction to it. But he wouldn't be trying to create this elaborate lie to people and try to convince them that it's something that it absolutely wasn't. You knew this from the very jump. In hell, for a couple of years, You had it in the back of your mind. So even with it not being in play for the public to see, at least 2 years ago, a year ago, even 6 months ago when the video was made, it was burning in the back of his mind. And he made a decision to act on it. Still, like his perspective as well, he may have won. Only time will tell. Like, LSU, they demanded. We saw the fans talking about some fire Kelly. We saw that. Like, they demanded. And with the kind of promise that Kiffin shows, again, he's not done that as a coach yet. He has not contended. He has not gotten in postseason play. So you've got to obviously get your foot in the door. There is still a good possibility that he does not perform like LSU believes that he will, and fails to come through on winning a championship with them. There's a chance that happens. But it's a chance that they are willing to take and that he was willing to take as well. While he might have become a little bit of a winner in his regard, he also lost once again. Like, the reputation that he has as a coaching figure and as a person when it comes to him in the football space, he's already getting dragged through the mud consistently. This made this even worse for him now. No question. And LSU tried to get him there on their own vehicular equipment and aircraft. Yet still, when he got to his private jet, with Marty Smith also having an interview with him there at that destination, they got to acquire the part, but you still had fans, Ole Miss fans, I should say, going out of their way to boo the man as he was about to board it. They are never going to be able to let him live that down, I should say, especially if he doesn't win. And even if he does, they're going to be distraught and filled with even more anger. Of course. Like, you're rubbing it in their face at that point. And it does make for an interesting twist in that rivalry, because if they can beat Ole Miss, hey, you're going to have some happy-ass Ole Miss. If they can beat LSU, you're going to have some happy-ass Ole Miss fans about this, following this situation right here. But yeah, now for another component of this. Because, yeah, did Lane Kiffin wrong the players here? Sure. Did he deceive a number of different people over the course of this time in his pursuit of the job? Sure. Could this have been handled a little better on his accord? Yes. But we have to look at the larger umbrella here. And to be honest, Alright? Before I get into it, this AP article states that, quote, Kiffin's decision played out for days, contributing to an already busy hiring cycle that saw several moves earlier Sunday, including 3 in the SEC alone, while players have transferred away from playoff-bound teams. A coach leaving a team that is 11-1 and all but certain to make the playoff is something new. Kiffin and Carter had agreed last week that a decision had to be made this weekend as negotiations dragged on. Carter could not afford to wait until after critical recruiting periods in December and transfer periods in January had passed before starting his coaching search. The CFP begins on December 19th, the semifinals don't occur until January 8th and 9th, and the final is January 19th. End quote. So now, to tie that in, and tie the original statement in, from multiple perspectives, even if there's more to the story with the situation involving the AD and Carter, he's not really in the wrong. He isn't. Like, that is a business decision that you are making. And on an emotional level, why the fuck, again, would you still want that man to be around your organization as a person who is now a part of a sworn rival who could literally give over intel to that team to scout them before they play next season? Like, that is on the docket already. That would just be heavily terrible for Ole Miss to engage in. And they wanted no parts of that whatsoever. They still have to go out and carry this out themselves. And if you're that unsure about Lane Kiffin being there now, like, damn, you could have already had this resolved. From Lane Kiffin's perspective, you could have already said something about this. You could have made your decision loud and clear earlier in the season so that we don't have to deal with this right now. But you waited, you dragged it out, and now you have the gall to ask Carter, as the AD in this situation, to give you a brief extension just so you can carry out for a little more time with the guys in that locker room, when you understood that this was not really a priority of yours, or at least the most demanding one, the most pressing one. It just wasn't. I can't say that he's just going to completely cutthroat as a coach and not value connection with his players at all. But that was not the first thing on his mind when he inked that deal. That was not the first thing on his mind when he had his family in these places, scoping them out. That was not the first thing on his mind when he was searching for what he thought at the time were better jobs years ago. It just wasn't. And now you want to try to use that to make Ole Miss to be out as a villain per se. And that's just not the case. Again, there could be more to the story with it. But from that standpoint, you have to give Carter his credit. Like, given the way that things are, you don't really have much of an option. You just don't. And that can't be blamed on Kiffin. That can't be blamed on the players. That can't be blamed on Carter. Because the way things are, the way they are, yeah, literally, if I can find the specific video that I reported this in, it would make all the difference. Because at that point, like, you had the NCAA come out and have these coaches get together, you know what I'm saying, game plan for a way to approach the transfer portal. And they had specific windows. They had one in January and one in December, if I'm not mistaken. And essentially, those guys voted, or well, there may have even been one in February. But again, everybody was against that because it would have been too late in the cycle. Fair enough. So they come back, they reconvene, and essentially they vote to have the transfer portal window take place in January. And everybody got in a fucking buzz about that. Because You have so much going on in that month of January already. The games are that close together, if it wasn't already clear. And then not to mention, you have these coaches participating in this as well, needing to go through a number of different media on top of trying to get these teams together to advance and compete even further to try to last for a championship. All that strain, all of that time and energy should really be spent on that, and yet you still now have to account for all of these potential deals. Yeah, and this is the video right here when I addressed the Buckeyes, beating the Fighting Illini amongst other things on October 12th, where I detailed that this happened. Not even 2 full months later, and you get a prime example of exactly why the fuck something like this wouldn't work. You get a prime example of a team having to grapple with that. Even if, again, they aren't necessarily responsible for the decision, with Lane Kiffin being the one to make it. That is just wrong. And in that case, the entire NCAA system needs to shift. It needs to. You make it worse by putting this for a January window, knowing just how oversaturated it already gets around that time. And you put a team actively in a case where they have to wrestle with this early on, after it just got voted on. Of course they can't afford to, in that situation, wait for all this time, because they aren't given the room to do so with how busted the structure is already for the NCAA in this element. And at that point, their reputation also takes a massive hit, because it shows for yet another time they don't know all of what the hell they are doing, what the hell they are trying to regulate. A lot of these situations have even had forced people to ask themselves if they even know how to self-regulate at all. And clearly this is another misstep, a massive one. Nothing about this particular situation is preventable. Now, it happened. But even with this being something that should be a wake-up call, do you really expect them to change up how these different things align? I mean, literally, you gotta have a fucking window where ball isn't actively taking fucking place. Duh. Come on, man. What are we doing? And granted, different high schools move at different paces, so there's a lot more that probably goes into it than I even know about. But all I'm saying is, spring ball, sure, you want to have a good group of guys in. But wouldn't it be easier, in a sense, if most high schools around the country end their football seasons in the fucking winter months. Wouldn't it make a little bit more sense to have a lot of the different processes that come with recruiting happen later on? Because National Signing Day should not be within the same fucking week of a regular season ending for a college football program. That doesn't give them time to do anything. That doesn't give them time to do anything at all. At the very least, it adds one more name to the ballot of potential suitors coming to your team. And what? Then what? What is your next move? You don't even have a clue. Sure, it's about competition at the end of the day. Because, when you have highly touted recruits involved in a cycle, you're going to want to be the first school to get your hands on that prospect. Sure. But it's just, the timing could be way fucking better. And the NCAA knows, or at least should have an idea, that okay, there's probably something about the current system that just isn't working fucking right. And change it. Because, yes, Lane Kiffin ultimately made his decision. The players are ultimately affected by this. And again, the AD is just doing what he has to do at the end of the day. Because of what the NCAA keeps failing to do. Even with them passing the NIL laws. Even with them having all this stuff in display. Maybe they are slightly trying to. But we still cannot sit here and say that they are taking proper care, giving proper respect to each and every single athlete or coach or member in their programs across the country. We cannot say that. And again, no place is perfect. So, yeah, that's probably obvious. But they haven't even hit a reasonable milestone. It just sucks. And again, with that small margin, damn near impossible margin to account for, with all these different regulations in place, you are free to make a choice. There is only so much that you can do. So it's definitely a wild thing overall. Lane Kiffin, you can view him however you want to view him. That's probably been the case for him for quite some time. He's going to be cast out as the villain. He may want to be viewed as a victim. Really, it falls somewhere in the middle. And there's a lot of gray area in all of this. Like I said, everybody, for a while, you're just in a spot where nobody wins. Sure, LSU may be able to truly accomplish something with Lane Kiffin. But for now, Ole Miss is taking a massive hit, and they may drop down in the rankings for this. Their AD now has to answer the call for this and try his best as the director. It's also part of his job description. But he wasn't expecting it to go like this, and now he has to clean up Lane Kiffin's mess. Players have to go out there and do this without their coach, who they fostered bonds with over a lot of time. A lot of time. In the NCAA, for yet another time, just have something incredibly questionable go down as a result of one of their flawed, completely laughable rules. In some weird way, Ole Miss might be trying their hardest to bounce back actively. As these articles both state from For the Win and also Sports Illustrated, respectively, Ole Miss will now have to rely on defensive coordinator Pete Golding as the team's reported interim coach to navigate the upcoming college football playoff, end quote. He is actually, per Pete Thamel, the next guy. Straight up. They don't have the interim tag for him. They are going all out with him right now. And even that is probably just to try to make light of this thing and turn this into a positive. Because by stamping that straight up head coaching label on him, even if Pete Golding might not be a known commodity in these spaces, they have somebody, at least recruits now, who understand, hey, okay, this guy's there now, and he's a true head coach. Well, he's going to be there, so, okay, we'll give this a shot. We'll go chop it up with him, see what the game plan is, and then I'll make a decision from there. To have that uncertainty on him by casting him out to be an interim guy, you're not going to solidify the recruits that you want on that team by doing that. That is a dangerous game you're playing. So they may actually be with him, but once more, in a situation that's already shitty, they've got to try to do something. And this could be that for them. Make no mistake, the offense could definitely drop off. You know, Lane Kiffin has definitely been an offensive mastermind. There's no question about that. But as a defensive coach, he's been pretty good. As this Sports Illustrated article states, which makes sense as well. This is from Ole Miss's section here. Golding put together one of the best all-around defenses in Ole Miss history in 2024, highlighted by one of the nation's most feared rush defenses in pass rush attack. The Rebels led the nation in sacks and tackles for loss, with both standing as new program records. The Ole Miss defense stifled opponents to just 80.5 rushing yards per game, which ended the season ranked second in the FBS and was the fewest allowed by a Rebel defense since 1966. End quote. So yeah, you can argue that is pretty fucking good defense. And I mean, you know, like, defense does win championships. You know, at the very least, they're going to be in playoff action, legitimately competing. But from what looked to be so promising, literally, just even 6 months ago, before that Florida game, before the Mississippi State game, and before the moment, tying it back into the game from earlier, that Cam Coleman fumbled that football, now is slowly dwindling and fading into complete and absolute obscurity. An amalgamation of different responsibilities are at play here, but through it all, LSU got their guy, right? It even got so bad to where you had this tweet from college basketball. Great head coach Rick Pitino challenging this. And it is a great point to emphasize. You could say that for any college sport, a coach is going to have a great influence. You can also find that heavily in college basketball. Heavily. Yeah, even with Rick Pitino being at St. John's, he's still gotten himself solid recruiting classes year in, year out as that team started to contend for national championship after national championship. Like, you can't possibly have a situation in basketball where you are in the middle of the season having players transfer, having coaches transfer like this. And that's why it doesn't operate that way. It would be a terrible look there. So what made the NCAA think that this would fly in college football? Boy, do I ever want to know. Goodness gracious. Man. What a fucking doozy of a situation. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I mean, this was necessary. I could not address that with that much context while chopping that into the actual recap that I had. Like, this was too large of a situation to not give it its own respective space to be discussed. Only time will tell what happens as we continue to move further and further away from it. But for now, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.